So Linux file systems. One of the main things about Docker specifically is that it creates like a union file system on your computer. So it's like file systems on Linux is something that I kind of interact with day to day, especially like debugging specific things in different file systems. It's, yeah, interesting the amount of options you can have. So yeah. So a file system is like an organized library. There's different ways to go about it, and since like Linux is about choice, or like I like to joke about that, but it is, you know have many different options. So the types of file systems, there's journaling, log structured, and copy on write. Copy on write is the main one that Docker uses, and that's actually why like Docker is such like a great tool, and like that it works today as managing large files and passing them back and forth between like different computers, different servers, all because copy on write is fantastic. We couldn't do it without that, or it just would not be a good user experience. Even though like people will open issues like this, 20 gigabyte container is having a hard time downloading. Like if you think about it, it's actually a miracle. So, oh, sorry, I did not realize this stupid thing. Cool. Hopefully that goes away. Nice. So journaling file systems, this is kind of the most common. So like NFS, all the ones that you kind of know today, Ext3 Ext4, XFS, they're all journaling file system. They create this file called a journal, and it keeps track of like basically changes. And it can like help with inconsistencies. So the advantages of journaling would be consistency, and like if you do an FSCK, it's going to be faster than if you were using a different file system. But also there's like a downside to the consistency in that it's not always ensured. Like the metadata files, there's some bugs in there. The thing with Linux is that there's really just like bugs everywhere. So it's about choosing the least bad option, which I've come to learn. But I mean, I'm not harping on Linux. I love Linux. I'm just saying it's like a compromise depending on the things that you want and the things that you need and like what you don't care about. So log structured is, I think, one of the more older types. Yeah, so it's pretty efficient, but then you have the downside of like reads being slower. It's very weird because each advantage kind of has like a similar disadvantage to the fact that like it's just bugs in the code that, yeah, cause these things. It's pretty interesting. Copy on write. There is a normal write file system, which like overwrites the files on your host. And then copy on write is, it basically copies the files and then it writes them again. It's kind of a hard concept to grasp, and actually if I could draw a picture, that would be a lot better. But the like main ones of these are BetterFS and ZFS. ZFS is more, I would say it works better on Solaris. The fork for Linux of ZFS is good, and I've used it. We actually added it to Docker. Docker also has BetterFS, also called ButterFS. But yeah, ZFS and both ZFS and BetterFS have this concept of a snapshot. So say I'm running things on my host and I like love it exactly the way it is. So I'm gonna snapshot it. Then I'm like, let me install a new kernel, maybe the RC version, and then everything craps out. You can restore back to the snapshot, which is so cool. And then it's just like nothing bad ever happened. And it's also like pretty fast because those snapshots use like diffs, and it's easy to go back in time depending on how much you changed. So yeah, it's efficient snapshotting. I mean, I think snapshotting is like the coolest thing ever. There are some downsides to these. I used BetterFS for like a year, and I don't anymore. But not because it's horrible. There are just like the disadvantages outweighed the positives for me. But yeah, I'll go over that later. This is all very opinionated, clearly. I have opinions about things. It's kind of part of my job. I comment on PRs all day. Yeah. So then there's union file systems, which is also the other type that Docker uses. And these are cool because you can have one file system as the base, and then you have the union file system over it. So it's also known as an overlay file system, but like there is an actual overlay file system, so that's very confusing. But AUFS and overlay are the two. Overlay has been in the kernel for a while, but it wasn't. They actually redid the entire implementation of it in 3.17 or 3.19. I can't remember now. But that's the one that we use in Docker, and it's actually really good. There are like the weirdest bugs with it, which I could go on for about a year about. I just can't even. And AUFS is really good too. That was actually the one that was first shipped with Docker, and like that was when Docker was like, okay, I can use this, and it will work, and it's really good. Yeah, I've been using Docker since like 0.5, so there were some versions that were really shitty. Yeah.
So you say several file system directories, so you're saying this advantage here is so you don't have to create separate partitions?
Yeah, you avoid the entire partition, which is awesome, especially in the case of Docker, because if someone wants to use BetterFS, like we rely on them to create the partition themselves, which is like kind of hard because they have to get like their sysadmin, blah, blah. It's supposed to be a developer's tool too, so it's kind of confusing. Whereas in the case of both of these, we can do everything for you, and it's like this entirely magical experience. Yeah. So these are all the common ones. Probably heard of some of them. Some of them are really old. I'll go into each in detail. So the Fat16 Fat32, these are like the ones that you'll use for like a hard drive or something. And even floppy disks, USB sticks, flash drives, probably why you've heard of it. NTFS, this is another journaling one from Microsoft. It's probably the ones running on your laptop. I'm actually not sure, don't quote me on that. I'm very bad at Microsoft things. And yeah, it has like ACL policies, which is cool. Ext3 Ext4. This is like, Ext4 is probably what is installed out of the box on your Linux host. It's pretty common. So the nice thing with that is that like you can use an overlay file system over it. You're not getting the cool snapshot restore stuff with like BetterFS or ZFS file system, but it like it does like Ext4 is still compatible with Ext3 and stuff like that, which is nice. Oops, sorry. Yeah. Riser file system. I'm not actually very familiar with this, but it's a really old one. I assume that it's still probably in like the Red Hat kernel, just because 2.6, probably roll 6. Who knows? That's also another assumption. Sorry. But yeah, so that's cool. I assume that it's probably pretty shitty if it's from a 2.6 kernel. Yeah. JFS is another file system, journaled file system, so obviously it's journaled. It's cool. BetterFS, also known as Butter. This one has a snapshotting, which is so cool. It's shipped in the kernel by default, which is also nice. AUFS is actually not. You have to install extra modules for that to work, so that's kind of a pain, but yeah. AUFS, another union file system is what it stands for. I also sometimes call it OFS. I don't know. I'm trying to start a trend. My coworkers think I'm crazy. But yeah, so there's also this concept of branches in AUFS, which we use in Docker. There's very complex different parts of all these file systems. So yeah, you could go on for days about each of them, but yeah. And overlay, 318, I put it in there. So I was not right. I said 317 or 319, right in between. Yeah, so this one's new, but the concept of the overlay file system was in the kernel for a long time. They actually changed the name so that it wasn't confusing. It was like just overlay before, but then they changed it to overlay FS, which actually they did like right before they merged it into the kernel. So then we had to change code on our side because we were like anticipating it. It was kind of funny. XFS, this one's used by NASA, which I think is cool. I mean, just like imagining the Linux that runs on NASA stuff, it's like was, you know, shipped so long ago and it's like so remote that I feel like maintaining that would be so hard. Just like trying to keep it up to date or even just adding anything to it. I have no idea. ZFS, common in Solaris. If you talk to like anyone from like Joyant, they love it. It is very cool. I have meant to install it as a partition on my host, but I set up all our CI servers, so I've used it on our CI. And I will say the Docker tests run way faster on the ZFS file system server than on any others. It's very weird. The first time I ran it, I was like, that's got to be some sort of something else involved, but it's really cool. So it's super fast and efficient. A lot of people like on the Solaris side are like, no, don't use the Linux fork. But I mean, I honestly think it's like good. Although I've never used the Solaris one, so I don't know. But that is like what Joyant ships on their servers. So that's cool. Cool. VFS, the virtual file system. This is like proc, all that. It's just, this is also another storage driver you can use in Docker, but obviously like you wouldn't want to use it in production or something because it's all virtual. But this is what we use for our tests. They all just use the virtual file system. It's cool. Oh, that was it. I was like, why is it not going to the next slide? So yeah, there are some exercises we can do with this. Let me bring up the other screen. Where's I lost? Cool. Let's see. Where did that go? I run everything in Docker containers, so my VirtualBox even is running in a Docker container. But of course, I lost the GUI. Okay, let's see. Okay, I can fix this. I'm gonna move this off the screen so you don't have to watch me do this. Here we go. 4. Ooh. Okay. So, this is really awkward. How do I zoom? Nope. Okay. So let's see. The first thing you're going to want to do for these, because we're going to mount a union file system, which is actually really cool, is, sorry, I lost my mouse. You're going to want to apt-get install Ufs Tools. So it's Ufs-tools. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is make a directory in our temp folder, and we can just name this dir1. Cool. And then in that same folder, we're just going to create a file, temp dir1. This file is in temp. Cool. So then if we like ls in there, just to make sure. There it is. And then also, hopefully you're in your home folder, you can ls in here too to see what there is. There's a bunch of crap. But yeah, so what we're going to do is create an AUFS mount, and since it's a union file system, we're going to combine this temp folder that we just made and your home folder. And you're like, I'm mounting my home folder. No, it's not that scary. Okay, so yeah. So there's just if you make a temp directory in your, or just any directory name, and then touch a file in there called, and you can call it whatever you want. It's just you're going to look for it once we combine the two, and it will be really cool. Like magic. Cool. Okay. So now we'll run, oh, we probably have to sudo this. Sudo mount. -t is type, AUFS. -o. And we're going to set our branch, and AUFS has this concept of branches, to our temp dir1. And then a colon. And our home folder, home vagrant. I forgot how to type. Okay, vagrant. And then after that, you're going to type none, because we're not like mounting a device node. Oh, and actually Control-C that. I forgot something else. That was fun. That was just practicing.
Can you make the font bigger?
Yeah. How do I?
If you do Control-Shift+.
Oh, cool. I do not use Ubuntu day to day, so thanks for bearing with me here. And also, I'll close that. Jeez. Okay. Control-Shift. Oh, okay, nice. Yeah. Okay, now let me resize that. Kind of. Okay, hang on. Let me move this back for a second so I can just fix it. Cool. Okay, that's bigger. That was all just for practice before. I was just joking. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to make the dir where we're going to combine them. So make dir temp AUFS combine. Cool. So now we have this temp dir1, temp AUFS combined, and then our home folder. And so the temp dir1 and our home folder are going to be combined into the other one. It's going to be cool. So now we'll go back to that other function that we were just messing around with for fun. Sudo mount type AUFS -o, and this is the branch. We're going to do temp dir1 / home vagrant. Sorry. Yeah, that was me. I just typed it wrong. That's a colon. There we go. Thanks. And none, no devices, and then the directory where we're going. So it should look like that. And then if you hit enter, no errors. Woohoo! Sorry, I mean, I just get excited. And then if you ls in here, in your temp, the combined, you'll see this file is in temp, and then all the folders from your home. So it's kind of cool. And also, like, you're not messing with the other one, the folders themselves. So it's just like this combined coolness. And you can also even mount this with options like read-only, stuff like that, which, yeah.
So you're saying basically, let's say I've got 10 different drives, and if I install these tools, I can make a combined directory of all those drives.
Yeah, yeah. As like a reference point, it's cool to see everything in one.
How intelligent is it? Like, if I copy a big file into the directory, like, where do I know it's actually being stored on the back end?
Yeah, so usually I would do this as like a read only, but there are, AOFS has this concept of diffs and branches, so the file actually goes into one of those and not really into the parents. So like we use a lot of the diffs and branches in Docker, but yeah, it gets pretty complicated in terms of like where things are if you start adding here. So I mean, I like to do this read only, but yeah, it is cool as like a reference point. I wouldn't necessarily like use it as like your main folder or something. Yeah, yeah.
Don't, like, combine 4 hard drives and then start writing.
Yeah, yeah, and expect stuff to be saved in a place where you would want it. Yeah, but it's cool. So then we can like unmount that. Sudo umount our temp. Cool, and then everything's still here. That would be funny if I did that and it wasn't. So then some other tools, just in terms of file systems. If we had BetterFS installed, there's also like BetterFS tools, just like this AUFS tools that we installed. Really what the AUFS tools installs is that like mount-t AUFS. It gives you like the header file so that you can do that for the mount tool. Yeah, so also there is like parted is a common tool used in Linux for making partitions. So if you just want to see like everything on dev SDA1, you can print it. Oh, it might be. Oh, so rough. Let me see. Actually, maybe it's not SDA1. Okay. Yeah, there we go. That was me. So now we can see like all our partitions on that device, which is cool. You can even like clean it with fsck. Oh, it's our root partition, so yeah, we could probably have cleaned the other one that I just unmounted. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Yeah, I don't know if we can clean something. I mean, that runs on boot, but yeah, you can imagine. Let's see. So also in terms of files that store these types of things about your file system, there is like etc fsck. Goddamn. Oh, fstab. Sorry, I am like not good at Linux today. Jeez. Oh, rough situation. Okay. So actually, let me just show you this on my host. That will be a lot better. So hi. Okay. So one thing I do, because I'm super OCD about keeping my host clean, is I mount downloads as tempfs. So every time I turn my computer off and on, it deletes everything in there. It was mostly like I had a script to do this, and I was like, wow, that's so dumb. I should just use it tempfs. So I put this in fstab, and now every time I boot the computer, it just runs it because, yeah, it's great. And it's just like really nice to not have to think about this. So also these other ones I have are at my apartment. I have this two like drives of media and movies that I bought, kind of. And yeah, there's like 40 terabytes of files, but there's 2 different volumes, and so when I'm at home, I can connect to it through NFS, and so NFS is really cool. It's cool, but it's also not cool. It's slow and kind of insecure, but it's also in my own like local environment in my apartment, which I also have secured with the firewall. But yeah, so those get mounted through there, which is really cool. So basically anything you want to like mount at boot, you can put into your fstab file. Systemd like kind of took this over, and you can also do it through systemd, but I like fstab because it's like classic, and systemd will then create the mounts from this. They like parse this file. So if I go into like my system, this is just like some interesting facts, list units. Wow, oh, struggles. Let's grab downloads. What am I doing here? There is a command for this. Oh, just kidding. It's this. So it created a mount service that just mounts that from the fstab. But I honestly think like not creating these like systemd files is a lot easier. But I have opinions about systemd, which I will not get into right now. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. Fstab as a concept. I love like Linux because everything is tracked by files. So it's easy to recreate your entire configuration just by having the same files on the new computer that you're setting up, which is really cool.